Good morning. Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's been a good week this week so far.
Good.
How about you?
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at the dentist's office.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
It's not for me, it's for Ian.
Oh, I got you. And I remember those days between the dentist and the orthodontist. I would just bring my laptop and sit in there. And especially the orthodontist, like when they were getting their braces put on, like, you're
Hmm.
sitting there for like 3 hours and I would just sit there in the waiting room. I met so many people. I didn't get any work done. All I did was talk to people in the waiting room the whole time. But I think that's, I've never met a stranger, so
Yeah,
there you go. That's just how it
yeah.
works. Um, I put the link up above for the handout. I don't know where everybody is. I don't know what is going on with this date and time. People are watching it on the recording, so there you go. But you just get
Mm.
one-on-one attention, I guess. But I hate that because it's supposed to be interactive with other folks from all over the country. But I will figure it out. But here we are, and last week my video editor literally put Laura Dahl and Kim Robertson on the thumbnail because it was just the two of us on the video. So he thought I was highlighting and featuring you. So someone
Yep.
wrote, "Oh, I see you featured Kim Robertson or something." I was like, "Yeah, uh-huh." So,
Oh,
Um, we are going to talk about becoming a better negotiator today. And this is an area that a lot of agents actually struggle with. Like, just people in general are conflict adverse. So, like, if they anticipate a conflict, they tend to put their tail between their legs and run the other way, right? You get either one of two types of people: the people who are they don't like conflict at all, and so they're very avoidant, right? Or you get
yep.
the pit bull on a bone, which is, they have got to have a win for their client no matter what it is, no matter what's at stake. Those are the people you don't want to be. You do not want to be the pit bull on a bone. You want to be collaborative. You want to work with other agents. You also, I think the biggest skill that most really good negotiators have is you have to have a really good understanding about the wants and needs of your client and what is most important to them. You cannot negotiate even with your client or on behalf of your client unless you understand how they tick, unless you understand what their hot buttons are, unless you understand what their idea of a win is, right? And a lot of agents don't take the time to ask their clients, like, how do I get a win with you? What would be considered a win for you? So somebody's popping on now, so I'm let them come in real quick. Um, but I think most agents tend to shy away from, if they anticipate that there's going to be a conflict, they tend to, run in the other direction, right? And so what we want to do is, good morning, y'all. Thanks for joining. We are just getting started, so you haven't missed anything. We're just talking about this session is on becoming a better negotiator. I was just kind of giving an overview that a lot of people in general are very conflict adverse, so they run from conflict. They don't like to deal with conflict. So a lot of and honestly, it's a skill that most agents have not honed or developed. No one's taught them how to be a good negotiator, right? So you find yourself in a position where your job, you're literally being hired by someone to help negotiate on their behalf, but you haven't been given the skills to be a good negotiator. You just kind of figure it out, right? If you're a mom, you've negotiated with your children their whole lives, right? But and that's the truth, is like you have really negotiated with your kids in some way, shape, or form, whether it's what they want to eat, what time they're going to bed, do they have to bathe today? It's a constant negotiation, right? But when it comes to clients, if we feel like there's going to be pushback, if we feel like, oh, they're never going to go for this, if we feel like it's going to cause conflict by asking for something, a lot of agents will just run in the other direction. I call it the tail between your legs and run. And it's the first sight of pushback from another agent and they don't know what to do, right? What I was saying before Allison and Holly popped on is, you're not taught negotiation skills, number one. Number two, most people avoid conflict, so they don't know how to push back without creating a bigger conflict. And then the third part is that to really be an amazing negotiator, you must understand what your client's wants and needs are. That's what I was saying when you guys popped in, is that you have to understand how they tick. What is a win for them? What is their main goal and objective? What is most important to them? On TV, you watch shows like Selling Sunset and Selling Miami, all these shows that literally show two agents either in the same location or whatever, but they're negotiating deals on behalf of their clients on the phone. Like, oh, can we get you to 17.5 million? Oh, he said, yeah, he would take that. And they're negotiating kind of on TV on behalf of their clients. Sometimes they don't show the client phone calls. They just are, the agent is like basically authorized to accept a certain amount or something like that. That's not how real estate works in the real world. We know that. You have to present all offers. You have to explain the offers and the ramifications of each and the terms to your clients, and make sure that they understand their choices in the whole situation. But what you will see is that on TV, the negotiations, they talk to each other in a certain way that I'm not a fan of. They treat each other like, hey, we both know that's not a real offer. We might say things like that to some of our cooperating agents or something, but that's just not how I've ever negotiated with agents. Like, I don't say things like, if you don't accept this, my buyer's going to walk, unless my client has instructed me to say that. If my client has said, you tell them that if they don't accept it, we're going to move on to another house, then I would certainly share that. But I'm never going to use that as a negotiation tactic or a scare tactic to try to get my way without a client having instructed me that, because I've had that, believe it or not, backfire in the past where you say, hey, this is so important to them that if you're not willing to do it, I think they'll probably walk. I've said I think they probably will, or they've just discussed with me that they are likely going to walk if this isn't done. I have said things like that, but if my client hasn't told me that they will walk, be careful saying that, because what happens then is you lose your leverage, your power, when your client is not willing to walk and you threw that card on the table, right? So first things first is that I need you to understand that the first step you need to do is understand what kind of negotiator you want to be. Am I going to be the pit bull on the bone, or am I going to be collaborative? Am I going to be a thinking outside of the box, solution driven agent that says, here's our problem, here's what we both want, is there a solution somewhere in the middle that we can meet, or is there some give and take somewhere where both parties can be happy, feel like they didn't get taken advantage of? I was in a function yesterday with a lot of realtors, and the topic of negotiation came up, and an agent basically said, we don't negotiate, we assist our clients to negotiate. And I 100% disagree with this statement. I feel like our clients are also not skilled on what terms to negotiate. They don't know. Some of them never bought a house before, ever sold a house before. So they're relying on us to give them advice about the things that we want to help them negotiate. What terms are most important? Your negotiation skills and tactics are also going to vary dependent upon your client, right? And how important the certain things are. So first things first is we want to understand what kind of negotiator you're going to be. Let me share my screen for those of you that, and I'm going to post this link one last time. I found that if you join a class late and someone had posted the link, you can't get the link. So that's why I'm posting it 3 times. But those are the links to my notes. But I'm going to share my screen real quick so that you guys can follow along with me. Hello, Kaylin and Holly and Allison. Thanks for joining us. Super happy that you're here. All right. So understanding your client is first and foremost what you need to do. You need to emphasize, like, what does your client need and want? What is of most importance to them? What are deal breakers for them? What's their hard line in the sand that they're going to draw? What's the difference between their must-haves versus wants? And you should discuss these things before you go writing an offer. You need to discuss your negotiation strategy with your clients. But first and foremost, you have to understand and ask yourself, am I really advocating for my client in the way that I should be, right? Meaning, what kind of negotiator am I going to be? Or am I going to let the other agent dictate how we relate to each other? Right. And I know, excuse me, we've all been guilty of that. If you've been on the other if you've been on the other side of a transaction with an agent that is a bully, there are a lot of agents who have never gotten any negotiation skills, don't know how to handle it, and that bully will steamroll right over you, right? And so you don't want to be the bully. You don't want to be the pit bull on the bone. You want to work collaboratively with the agent to find a good solution of how to be a better, like how to get a win-win for both people. So first things first is you're going to start with emphasizing your market analysis and the value that what is the best value for their investment for your client. You should be providing a market analysis. That's a given to anybody, but the purpose of the analysis is to help you get your client to an appropriate number, if that makes sense, right? So whether you're representing the buyer or the seller, you're going to run a market analysis so that you can guide them towards an appropriate offer to begin with, right? I think you need to establish with all your clients right on the get-go at the very beginning of your conversation with them that all clients want a deal, whether they're a buyer or a seller, right? All buyers want a deal. They want a discount. They want to feel like they got something of value. And that's what I mean by emphasis on value. They want to feel like they got a deal. How many people have you worked with where they were like, oh, I didn't pay full price, or I got the seller to pay some closing costs, or I didn't have to pay, title. They feel like they won something, right? Which is why it's really important to ask your client, what would be a win for you? What would make you feel like you got a deal? You got good value. In a market that we just came out of in Middle Tennessee, where people were writing offers $150,000 over list price, nobody felt like they got a deal, right? Those buyers felt like they really got screwed over because they had to give up all of their rights or all of the things that would make them feel like they had some kind of control or position of power. They didn't have any, right? So even in those kinds of markets, you still have to ask your client, what would be a win for you, right? Is maybe, paying less over list price, being able to negotiate how much, or remember there are 36 terms on that purchase and sale agreement that you have to play with. And most agents only go to price. That's the only one they're worried about. But there's lots of other terms that you can play with in your negotiations. You can do a faster close. You can have better financing. You can not have all these contingencies. You can pay some of the seller's closing costs. There's a lot of terms that you can play with that make your offer much more presentable and much more attractive. And sales price is not the only feature you need to worry about. Okay. We are going to prioritize our needs and wants of the client and making sure that we understand the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves. The buyers always will aim to lower the purchase price if possible. And this is what I'm saying is that buyers always feel like they want a deal or that they want to feel like they got a deal. In our market that we're in right now, lowering the purchase price might not be the best strategy for your client. If you have $25,000 to play with where maybe your buyer wants to come in $25,000 low, are you using that money towards a credit from the seller instead of reducing the price 25 grand? If you use that 25 grand to do a buy down on the interest rate, you could be saving $800 or $900 a month in a payment by applying that 25 grand to a buy down instead of reducing the price 25 grand, right? And so are there strategies that you can implement that are better terms for your client that might not just be reducing the price, right? You need to talk about these variable terms in your offer, those 30 some items that we have to play with. You need to talk about those with your clients to say, of these items, what is the most important for you to get so that you feel like you got a deal, right? Do you feel like you got that you weren't taken advantage of? The market analysis and the statistics, like anybody that's worked for me for any amount of time understands that I always will show the list price to sales price ratio statistic to a buyer, because your buyer wants to write an offer $25,000 below list price, but the data shows that every house that is sold in the last 3 months has closed at 99 or 100% of list price. So what would make you think that the market would support a discount of $25,000 off the list price, right? Or your client wants $20,000 worth of closing costs paid on their behalf, but every closing that's happened in the last 3 months, the seller's never paid more than $5,000 in closing costs, right? Maybe the market is still shifting from a buyer's or seller's market to a buyer's market, and the closing cost concessions are not that high. That showing them that statistics report keeps them more in line with what the market will bear. It doesn't mean that you can't present an offer according to your client's wishes, but you want to guide them to write better offers, right? You want to help them arrive at a number that's a better place to start. I have a listing right now that's listed $959, and I got an offer yesterday for $800. What? Like, that was not a guided offer. That was not guided by data. It was not guided by anything other than this buyer wanted to offer that much less than the list price. And are you doing your job on the front end to make sure that they're guided appropriately? Are you pissing off the seller with an offer like that? Absolutely. Right. Are you doing your due diligence and inspections? You can emphasize the importance of thorough inspections, and then the due diligence to cover your issues. We already know that that will impact the value and the cost for the buyer in the future. But are you using that data to help you negotiate better terms for your client? For example, you do a home inspection. The inspection reveals that the roof is really on its last leg. The HVACs are original. The water heater has not been replaced in probably 10 years. But your client offered full price. Are you then coming back and leveraging the findings of the home inspection report to negotiate a better price for your client? Right? Is that even something that you're thinking about? Are you looking at that saying, you know, we offered full price, but we didn't really understand the age of some of these things. We didn't know that we were probably going to have to invest tens of thousands of dollars to bring this house up to the level that we want it to be for security, right? So are you leveraging and using those things? So when you're representing sellers, you absolutely need to maximize your property appeal, what that looks like. The better you condition your property for the market, the least amount of negotiations you have to do, right? The better the property is presented to the market, making its greatest first impression, the less you should have to fight and argue with people over price and terms, right? Because the better condition it is, and when it's priced appropriately to begin with, people don't come in and lowball you. They don't try to ask for $20,000 worth of closing costs. They don't ask for, an allowance to paint and an allowance to change the carpet and all of those things that you start to see when properties come to the market that are not in the right condition. Are you using strategic pricing? Are you using the CMA to set your price? Is it in line with what the market will bear? Are you being bullied by your client? Do you have to negotiate with your client to arrive at the price that's fair? Remember, the negotiations that we do are not always on behalf of our clients. Sometimes those negotiations are with our clients, right? How are you convincing your client that the price that they're trying to put on the house is not appropriate? That their neighbors have already demonstrated that that price didn't work because they did 5 price reductions, right? Are you negotiating with your client to get to where they should be? Let me get into negotiation of the best offer when you're negotiating on behalf of your seller or your buyer. Again, you have to ask yourself, what is most important to your client? If I'm representing a seller and maybe they're being relocated for a job, the price might not be the most important thing. It might be time, right? Or if they're building new construction, the timing of the offer might really matter. If you have a house that's in danger of foreclosure or is on the verge of having to go short sale, time is really important. If somebody can close faster, it might be worth less money to them, right? So those terms that impact the win for either side, you also have to look at besides just the price. The closing dates are really important. Contingencies, as you know, like when we're in a super fast market, the less contingencies you have, the better. This is why so many buyers in the last 2 years were frustrated with the market, is because they couldn't do their due diligence properly. They couldn't really do inspections, or they would lose out on a home. And some of those people got burned big time. They bought houses sight unseen with no inspections, no appraisal. They overpaid for it. Those houses are going to come back for sale in the next 3 to 5 years, and they're going to be upset because they did not appreciate it the same
Hey,
rate, right?
where's the little one?
I'm going to mute Kaylin just for a second. All right, let's talk a little bit about some real examples that you can use. A buyer is interested in a property that's been on the market for several months. The buyer's agent conducts a market analysis and discovers the property is priced above comparable sales in the area. So number one, if you represent the buyer, your first negotiation is going to be with the buyer, right? To try to understand for them, what price do you want to offer? You know that this house has been on the market for a while. Know that you're presenting a lower offer than what the seller wants. What is your strategy for presenting a lower offer than normal or lower offer than list price to the listing agent? So you can unmute yourself so that we can all share and talk to each other. What is your strategy for negotiating when you know your client's writing a lower offer than list price? What's your negotiation strategy?
Remove some contingencies.
Okay, so you would counteract the lower price by removing some contingencies. Is that what you're saying? That's great. That's a great strategy, right? How do you present to the other agent without being offensive that the house is overpriced?
I just had an agent do this on my listing. She did her own kind of like mathematical equation,
Sure.
which I was like, okay. I mean, I wasn't offended, but I was also like, well, it's gonna appraise regardless. But she wanted to show me how like her
How they
buyer can't
arrived.
pay more. Yeah.
Okay.
So
No, and I'll be very honest with you. A lot of times when I see a huge disparity between the list price and what the comps say, my first goal is to obviously run my own comps to check and see, like really do a thorough market analysis, checking the tax records for off-market properties. Make sure you do that. Running a really thorough analysis and making notes of conditional situations that are of concern to the buyer. So that the roof is really old, or that the ceiling needs to be repaired from an old water leak, or this buyer is in particular going to have to make certain repairs to make this house livable. What I'm not talking about is that your buyer has decided they want to knock out a wall, they want to renovate the whole kitchen, they want to replace the floors. How many of you have had an agent that says, oh, well, this is too much work for this buyer, but that's because of the buyer's interest, not because of that doesn't make the house not worth that because they've decided they want to do those things, right? And so, you know, your first situation is to do your CMA. Your second goal then is to, with respect and with a tone that is not going to put them on the defense, is, ask questions. Don't come out right out the gate and go, look, I did a CMA. Your house is overpriced. This is why we're priced that way, right? This is why we came in at that offer. I've had agents do that to me. Yo, we did our own CMA. We don't agree with your evaluation, and the buyer just feels like it's overpriced. So this is what you get. What I normally would do is ask the listing agent, do you mind sharing your CMA that you used when you priced the property? Most of them will have no problem with it, right? Some of them that do should really look over their CMA before they send it to you, because they just obviously chose houses that are not even in the same neighborhood. They're not even similar comps. I don't know where they came up with the number, but it's not based on actual data. And they're not similar comps that the appraiser would use, right? So number one, I would ask the other agent, hey, can you provide us with some with the CMA that you did when you priced the property? If they're not willing to do that, then what I would say is, I've also run a market analysis that I'd like to share with you as the listing agent, and so that you can see where my buyer is coming from, right? When you present it in that way, I think you're gonna pull down the defensiveness, because if you just say, hey, I don't know what you were smoking when you priced this house, but it's overpriced. I've had someone say that to me. Like, are you kidding me? That's not going to put me, like, we're not going to be best friends. I'm going to be on the defensive. I'm going to be mad. Like I don't feel like, don't question what I'm doing. And so you just need to choose your words carefully in a way that does not offend the agent, that makes them understand that it's coming from a place of data. My very first house that I sold in Tennessee, the other agent, the listing agent on it, was actually the past president of WCAR. And so I pulled a market analysis for my buyer, and this house was grossly overpriced by about $75,000. And so I knew that I had to tread very lightly. I was dealing with a very experienced agent who was a broker, owner of a company, but I knew from the data that they were way off, right? The price per square foot was higher than anything that had ever sold in the neighborhood, and the house was not that upgraded. So I don't know where she was coming up with it. But I had to present, when I presented the offer, I said, I've also attached my market analysis so that I can show you that we actually are offering you above the average price per square foot, above what the highest sale in the neighborhood has been, but it's not where you have it priced, right? So again, anytime you know you're going to anticipate some pushback, how you present it to people makes all the difference in how they react. Our words, backing it up with data, asking for clarification, making sure that you acknowledge to the other agent that you understand that they've loved their home. We understand that they have put considerable money into it. You want to do what I call the compliment sandwich, which is I'm going to give you a compliment on the front end. I'm going to acknowledge and validate that, you know, this is probably an emotional sale for them, or that they have priced it based on how much they feel like it's worth. And then you're going to address the issue. Listen, this is way, I can't find any comps that support this, and I'm concerned about financing. I'm concerned about how this is going to work out. And then you're going to end that with a compliment on the back end, which is, or some kind of positive acknowledgement that is, you know, I know that your seller really wants to sell this house, and my buyer really wants to buy it. They've already envisioned themselves and their kids running in the backyard, right? We already know that that's happening. Like, you want to paint that picture that, listen, they're very interested. This is not a joke. This is an offer you should take seriously, but you want to make sure that they understand how serious you are, and that you're kind of buffering the bad news, which is, the bad news is we didn't offer you what you wanted. But you must do that in a way that is respectful and professional. When you're representing a seller, so a seller is looking to sell their property quickly due to a job relocation. The market is super competitive with several similar properties available. So imagine a neighborhood that has 6 houses all on the same street for sale. The seller's agent recommends a slight underpricing to attract more interest and potential bidding wars, which sometimes works. I want to go back to Kaylin's comment a second ago, because she said, we all know it's going to appraise. Be careful and cautious, because you're going to get burned by those appraisers that are very conservative, or that are trying to make market corrections themselves by having lower appraisals. I've come into contact with it probably 3 or 4 times over the last 4 months, where my appraisals have come in low. And the reality is that they chose to just pick outline comps to justify their lower price. You've also seen where agents have tried to manipulate the data, where they bump up the price, hoping that the appraiser will come in somewhere underneath where they actually came to an agreement. But it's really stupid, because the appraiser gets a copy of the purchase and sale agreement. So I'm not sure why you would want to manipulate that. But Kaylin, you are right in a lot of aspects, that 9 times out of 10, especially in Middle Tennessee, I'm going to say, for those of you that are listening somewhere else, is that a lot of times it will appraise exactly for the sales price. Isn't that a miracle that it appraises for $456, $997? I think that's really interesting that that's the same price that it appraised for when that was our offer price. But you are going to have to talk to your seller about what's most important to them. Do they want a quicker sale? Are they really trying to get every last dime? Do they need every last dime out of the house? Maybe they're moving to Seattle, or they're moving to California, and of course the house prices are higher there, so they need more money for their down payment. Are there other terms that you can play with? All right, let's get to the goodies. Some of the things that you can do to be a better negotiator first. Number one, choose your words carefully. Like, this is not on my list, but I just want, like, for me, decide what kind of negotiator you want to be. Am I going to be the pit bull on the bone, or am I going to be collaborative, cooperative, and an outside of the box thinker? Number one. Number two, am I going to stand my ground and stand firm on something that's really important to my client, or am I going to put my tail between my legs and run when the agent gives me a little pushback? When you are on the other side of the table from a bully, are you going to run, or are you going to stand your ground, gather yourself, think about how you want to respond, and then respond appropriately? I want to mention too, we are such, like, in response to our phone, in response to our clients, we don't like to make our clients wait. We don't like to make the other agent wait. We want to check it off the box, and say we've dealt with this and we've addressed it. But sometimes we need to calm down. Sometimes we need to actually take a step back, take a breath, and say, let me look at this and see what solutions we might have. Sometimes you have to let another set of eyes look at it. Sometimes you have to talk to some of your coworkers or your other realtor friends and say, what would you do in this situation? Because we are hot-headed. We are reactive. We are emotional. Remember, we get paid when this closes, especially when you haven't had a closing in a while and you get an offer, you really want it to close. So sometimes some agents, out of their own personal agenda, are not the best negotiators for their client because they don't want to make this fall apart because they need the money. You need to remember who you represent. You need to remember who hired you, who is relying on you to be the best negotiator on their behalf. It's not about your paycheck, right? It's about what's in the best interest of them. And I will tell you a very quick embarrassing story. I was actually a dual agent for a buyer and a seller in a house in Norfolk. So this is back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, like a long, long time ago. And I was trying to negotiate the inspection. I had already negotiated the terms of everything with the offer. And by the way, when I did dual agency back in the day, everybody sat at the dining room table together or the conference table together, and we actually crafted the offer at the table. One person did not get the benefit of my advice over the other one without the other one hearing what was going on, right? So everybody got the benefit of the exact same advice at the exact same time, and they negotiated everything at the table and we put it on paper. That is how I operated, right? Because I wasn't losing my license and I didn't want to get in trouble. And it was a sticky situation. We negotiated all the terms at the table. We get under contract. We do our inspections, and some things come up on the inspection that we decided we need to do some further negotiations. And I basically I was only counting my paycheck. I was really counting, like, I really need this to work out because I'm going to get paid for both sides. I got really big green eyes about looking at my money. And I remember in my negotiations to my seller client that I said, well, if you don't accept this, I'm literally going to, I'm stupid enough to say this. If you don't accept this offer, I'm literally going to lose out on $50,000. And he looked at me and he said, Laura, if I don't accept this offer, I don't sell my home. And what does that mean for me? Like, like, he literally put me in my place in a good way of reminding me what was important. I needed to focus on the bigger picture and how this deal affected all the parties, not about my money, not about my commission. And so I just want to remind you of that number one, you absolutely need to remember, who do you represent? What is their best scenario? What would make them happy in this negotiation? And how do we best work on their behalf, right? I want you to think about, are there ways that you can think outside of the box? Can you offer trade-offs instead of concessions? So what that means is, like, if a buyer is super worried about the things that came up on the home inspection, maybe the seller can offer a 3-year home warranty, not a 1-year, but a 3-year home warranty. Maybe the seller can provide, prepaid handyman service for 5 hours or something. But are there concessions that can be made or trade-offs that ease the client's mind, right? You don't always have to reduce the price. I want you to think of other solutions besides just reducing the price? Are there any other ways that we can get this same thing done that would make both parties happy? Are you thinking about flexible financing options? And that's where I get back to, instead of reducing the price 25 grand.
This is the meeting that I was on when I was at the office.
Instead of reducing the price 25 grand, can you take that 25 grand and apply it in different ways? Can you use that towards buy down? Do you pay some of the closing costs? Are you paying title? Are you buying a warranty for 3 years instead of 1? Use that $25,000 in more creative ways than just reducing the price. The other thing I want you to think about too, when your buyer wants to come in and offer a stupid low amount, right? Sometimes I have to remind them too, they've already shown them the data and they still want to come in with a dumb offer. And sometimes I have to tell them, I want you to put yourself in the position of the sellers for a second. And I want you to envision that you're now the seller of this house. You now are invested in this neighborhood and what happens in this neighborhood. And if you reduce your price this low, what have you just done to all the equity of all your neighbors? If you don't care and you're never going to see these neighbors again, go on with your bad self. But if you do care about protecting the value of your neighborhood, you can't just accept this offer and not think that it doesn't affect the people around you. Sometimes you need to remind them of that. You do have very conscientious clients that will care about basically protecting the sanctity of the neighborhood, or like they won't sell to investors, or that will not accept an offer from a client that's going to tear it down and build too tall and skinnies or whatever that is. But I'm just saying, you definitely want to make sure that you are addressing with your clients. If they are not hearing you, sometimes you have to think outside the box and think of another way I can put it in perspective for them, to make them really think about, is this something, do I want to reduce the price this low, right? How is that going to impact the people around? Use of non-traditional incentives. So sellers can offer unique perks that make their property more attractive. So I've seen things, again, we talked about a warranty, but maybe they throw in lawn care for a year. Maybe they throw in HOA dues for a year. If your houses are sitting, your listings are sitting, these are types of incentives that you can offer that will also help move your listing, but don't forget about them when you're representing a buyer. You certainly can ask for, hey, if you pay the HOA dues for a year, this would make my buyer feel comfortable paying this price, right? Or maybe that your seller is willing to provide throw in the golf cart. Again, we don't want to get into selling personal property versus real property, but I have seen houses that came with a car, that came with a tractor, a riding lawnmower, or whatever that is. So sometimes you can throw in non-traditional incentives to help. You don't necessarily have to reduce the price for that. Again, timing is really important. We saw a lot of this in the Middle Tennessee market. When people were overpaying for houses and people were basically giving the seller their firstborn child and tacos for life just to get their offer accepted. I saw a lot of deferred closings, which meant we'll let the seller stay in the property for up to 3 months for free if you accept our offer. Or, a buyer wants to move in sooner. The sellers might go ahead and let them do an early possession. So sometimes possession can be something you can navigate as well. Creative use of your contingencies. Basically, the contingencies are a protection mechanism. Those are things that the buyer wants to use as leverage if something comes up in that contingency that would allow them to terminate the contract and typically get their money back. But you might have to make things contingent on a zoning approval. You might have to make them contingent on a satisfactory review of the HOA's books and rules and bylaws and guidelines. I only want to buy this if the planned development that's coming next door actually gets approved, or something like that. You can offer things like higher deposits, shorten your inspection window. You guys already have learned a lot of these strategies from when we were in such a hot multiple offer market, but don't forget about these things in terms of, just because it's not a fast market, you can still negotiate some of these things on behalf of your seller client, or on behalf of your buyer client in a different way. Splitting the difference is obviously an idea that a lot of people do, but remember, you don't have to ask. It's not all or nothing. If you ask for closing costs and your buyer really wants $10,000 in closing costs, maybe the seller is only willing to do $2,500. Is there an amount that the buyer would feel okay if the seller didn't pay all of it? Is there an amount that the buyer would feel okay with accepting? The last one, incorporating third parties, is basically if you just cannot come to an agreement, if you and let's say you and the other agent are butting heads, let's say that you guys are not coming to an agreement on how this should work, you might have to get a third party involved. You might have to get a broker involved. You might have to get the lender involved to convince the listing agent that this is truly, and the lender might have some software available to them that also has some market analysis features. They have software and tools that will help evaluate the value of a property sometimes, and maybe you need to use that as leverage because the agent doesn't trust your CMA, right? So that is where there are some third parties that you might get involved. Maybe you have to be solution driven. You have to be a natural problem solver in the way that, is there something that can mitigate the concern for the seller? Meaning, are there all these contingencies that would give the seller concern that the buyer's probably going to walk? Can you alleviate those? Can you minimize those? Or on the buyer's side, are they really concerned about the condition of things? And is there something that the seller can do to alleviate the buyer? Maybe you have the HVAC serviced and cleaned. Maybe you have the chimney cleaned and serviced. Like just cleaned out and all the stuff serviced. Maybe you have the lawn care, you go ahead and have the yard seeded and fertilized if it's that time of year. Maybe you include a 3-year warranty. Maybe you buy them extended warranties on appliances or whatever their concern is. You also could remember, your buyers overestimate everything, right? They think it costs $20,000 to paint a 1,500 square foot house, or they think it's $300. There's no correct answer. They either underestimate or overestimate. But maybe you need to bring in some third parties to give you estimates and couple those estimates with your offer or your amendment to reduce the price and show them where you're coming from. You will get a lot further with another agent when you can back up. Listen, we already had an estimate. This is what this company estimated the work to be. This is why we're asking for the reduction that we are in price. Do not expect that agent is just going to accept your word for it that the buyer thinks it's not worth that. If you're looking for resources on how to be a better negotiator, I just wanted to give you a little taste and talk about negotiation on behalf of your clients. There's a full course out there for real estate agents that is the Real Estate Negotiation Expert. That's the one that I recommend, that will actually go through how to figure out how your clients tick and think, how to decide what would be a win-win for them, what your strategies would be for negotiation that we didn't dive into today, which is really like active listening, validating, isolating their objections, bringing them back around. That is a whole other class. But if you're looking for more resources, listen, I just know I'm not a great negotiator. I don't like conflict. I avoid things when people push back on me. And when someone's a bully, I put my tail between my legs and I run. If this is you need to up your game on your negotiation skills. You really need to work on how to not be intimidated by other people, how to advocate for your client for what's most important to them. And so there are some resources that I put together for you. Some books, Getting to Yes, Never Split the Difference is a very good one. That's written by an FBI hostage negotiator. I recommend it all the time because I'm a crime junkie anyway. And so he does give some stories that are relative. And then Bargaining for Advantage is also a great one. There are online courses you can take. Like I said, there is the CNE designation. There's also your regular associations are going to have other classes and certifications as well. There are podcasts you can listen to. This Negotiate Anything is a great podcast. And then there's TED Talks on negotiation as well. So I'm tired of talking at you, but I would love to know what, when it comes to negotiation, what's something that you need more help with, or something that you need a little bit more guidance with, um, that we can dive into while you're here today. Or Holly? Oh, you guys are perfect negotiators already, I know. I think if you just focus on number one, what kind of negotiator do I want to be? Do I want to be collaborative? Do I want to be an outside of the box thinker? What is of most importance to my client, right? And then what words are you using? What phrases are you using to help get your point across, or to help convince that agent that this is in the best interest of both parties? Are you asking questions of the listing agent to ask them what's most important to your seller? We learned that tactic a lot when we were in the multiple offer situation. That you would ask the other agent what's important so that you can structure your offer in the best way. The same thing's going to happen when you're talking about negotiating. When you're trying to draft an offer and you're trying to negotiate terms, you want to know what's most important to the seller. What is going to work for your client? Do they need time? Is time most important? Is the sales price most important? Is lack of contingencies most important? Is financing most important? What is most important, so that then you can understand where they're coming from. My biggest tip and biggest advice to you would be, once you have discovered what is most important to the client, you really need to understand what would be a win-win for both parties. So if you have not asked the listing agent what's a win-win for them, and you have not thought of any other solution that might work, are you really negotiating on behalf of your client? We all know that the houses, most of our buyers bring us the houses that they're interested in. They have access to all of that data, but they come to us and rely on us to help them find a better deal, to actually negotiate terms that are good for them. And that is where your job comes in. That's where your responsibility is to figure out, how can I get my client to feel like they were not taken advantage of, that they feel like had a good deal, and what other solutions can we provide that might work for the seller beyond just reducing the price? Are there other terms that we can play with? Are there other creative solutions that we can come up with? You may need to talk to a broker or a mentor or your coach or another agent. You may have to workshop that a little bit to see, are there any solutions that we can come up with before you just give up, right? So, Holly said, it's just being able to know what the actual answer is when working with an experienced agent, or knowing the next question to ask. So this is one of the things I knew was a concern for Holly, because I work with Holly all the time. And so I know that this is an issue for her. And this is what I was getting to earlier, is that you may need to buy yourself time, right? You don't necessarily have to answer that agent back immediately. You may have to say to them, this is really important. I'm not focused right now, or I need some more time to dive into this and really think about some other solutions. Give me to this afternoon, and let me call you back and let's discuss this further. We are in such a society that we are responsive right away. When people text us, we feel like we have to answer right away. When they email us, we feel like we have to respond right away. You don't have to respond to anybody immediately unless the place is burning down. That's an emergency. But you do not have to give somebody an immediate response. You can buy yourself time by saying, this is something I really need to get back with my client and talk some more about, and find out what's most important to them. Let's reconvene this afternoon and we can talk about this further. The hard part is that when you are dealing with an agent that is a bully, and we've all had them, especially if you are conflict adverse, when you get pushback, it is very important that you stand up for yourself. It's very important that you stand up for your client, that you buy yourself to collect your words, and that you do not react emotionally to a bully, right? You need to make sure that they understand, listen, I understand that, and this is my validation of it. I understand that you are really trying to do what's best for your client. I understand that you are trying to negotiate the best deal for them. I would be doing the same if I were the listing agent. Let me get back with my client and let's discuss some other solutions. Let's discuss what's most important with them, and I will be back in touch with you. Right? If they are crossing lines that need to be addressed, then you need to let them know. Listen, we are both advocating for our clients. I commend a really strong negotiator. I have a lot of respect for agents that negotiate on their client's behalf. That's the compliment, right? Stroke their ego if you need to disarm them. I respect your hustle. I respect your grind for your clients. However, I do believe we are going to have to work cooperatively together to get this done. And what I'd like to do is take a step back. I want to gather my thoughts. I want to find out what's most important to my client, and I will get back in touch with you and let's discuss this further. But what I won't have is you being disrespectful or being unprofessional or treating me like we are not in this together, because it will take the both of us to work together collaboratively to get this done. Right? At some point, if that does not disarm them, you may have to go over their head. I definitely had a situation with a client real quick. I'll tell you, I had the worst transaction of my career in 25 years was with an agent in Spring Hill. And he was new to the state, but he was the listing agent and he really wasn't familiar. He'd not done any business before in Tennessee. This was his family's house, someone that he was related to. And I wrote a very clean offer. At the time in that market, sellers were getting about 98 or 99% of list price. In that county, it was customary for the seller to pay title expenses. My buyer came in at list price. They did a normal inspection period. They did not ask for a warranty. They did ask the sellers to pay the title insurance. They were paying their own closing costs. So at that time, that offer was as clean as it could get, right? It was a normal, perfectly acceptable offer with no other offers on the table at that time. The listing agent calls me and says, why did you dare write an offer with concessions? And I was very confused. What concessions are you referring to? And he was referring to the title insurance being paid by the seller. And he was adamant. It became a very, very confrontational conversation. He was defensive. He got angry. He told me I needed to go ask somebody about concessions. I needed to talk to somebody. And the reality was that he really needed to have a conversation with his broker, and he needed to understand what was common practice in this market. And that, of course, his sellers did not have to accept an offer that had them paying the title. But don't try to educate me about what's normal or common when you don't know, right? And so it became a very confrontational situation where he was recording every phone call we had. He was CCing his broker on every email. But he did that because I had to go over his head. I literally had to call his broker and say, you know, I've written an offer for this agent. I understand that his sellers can accept whatever they want, but here's the advice that he's giving his clients. And I really feel like as a newer agent to Tennessee, he might need a backup from you explaining that this is normal, that this is common, because I think he might be giving his clients some bad advice. He did not like me going over his head to his broker. He got very pissed off and offended. He threatened me. He recorded all my conversations. At the end of the day, he never disclosed that this was his family member. And like I said, it was probably the worst deal I've ever had in 25 years. But my point is that sometimes you do have to go over people's head. If you cannot get a response from an agent, Holly's had some people that they've just not responded to her. Like days go by, they don't respond, or people she's trying to set up showings for. We all have, like, we have submitted offers to people that they just don't answer us, right? And you're wondering, well, are you going to respond to my offer? And they just say, oh, we're waiting to see what comes in over the open house. Well, I have an expiration date on my offer. You just can't ignore it. But that's what they do. And so sometimes you have to go over their head and call their broker and say, the way that this agent is behaving and practicing, I have some concerns with, and I need you to know. Everything that you do in this business, though, remember, if you live in a small town, you're going to see these agents again, right? If you're in a market where you're working with these agents for multiple times, you're probably going to see them again and work with them again. So you can't be the pit bull on the bone, because no one will want to work with you. You cannot argue with another agent just to win one thing so that you can say, I won for you. Look what I did for you. That is not collaboration. That's not cooperation, right? And you don't want to have the reputation of, oh God, I don't want to work with her, right? But if you have to, you might have to go over someone's head and say, this is a concern. Here's what we've done. Can you get involved and help? Can you assist, right? But your success in negotiating tumultuous things are all going to be about the tone that you use, the words that you use, and how you present the information to the other agent. And do you couple it with a solution, an alternative? Have you thought about? If you just call a listing agent and say, this is what my buyer wants, they said take it or leave it, as a listing agent in a market where I know I can sell this house to somebody else, I don't care what your buyer wants. But if you present it to me in a way that says, here's what our concern is, here's what we really would like to see, and here's somewhere where we can meet in the middle. What do you think about that? That is going to be much better received than this is what my buyer wants, take it or leave it, right? When you use words that are attackful, it will put the agent on defensive. You're not going to get anywhere with the agent. So treat people how you want to be treated in terms of a negotiation. How do you want to work with somebody when you have you been on the other side of someone from the table that is a good negotiator? A good negotiator establishes and acknowledges what is a win for both parties, right? A good negotiator acknowledges what they want, but that's not something we can do. So what is an alternative, right? Or this is the reason we can't accept that. Let's talk about some other things we might be able to do. That's good negotiation. Putting people on the defensive, being aggressive, threatening people, false threats that your clients are not willing to back up is not how you win with people. It is not going to help, right? So my advice to you is, number one, truly understand how your clients tick. When you're negotiating with your client, you need to make sure that they're understanding that you're on their team. You know, I say that all the time. If I'm trying to convince my client to think something other than what they want, I need them to understand that I'm on their side. I'm on their team. I'm on working on your behalf, but I need you to understand what the market conditions are like. I need you to understand what the situation is. I need you to understand why they're coming in at the price that they are, right? I need you to understand why they're asking for title insurance. I need you to understand why we can't just throw it on the market at this price and see what happens, right? Well, you've got to back it up. They're relying on you to consult them, to give them advice based on your experience and based on your knowledge of the market, right? They don't know all of that. So I would just say to you, number one, decide what kind of negotiator you want to be. Sharpen your skills and learn some better negotiation skills on how to talk, what words to choose, how to get people to buy into what you're offering. And then you need to understand what is of most importance to your buyer and to your seller so that you can properly work on their behalf. Okay. I hope that this was super helpful to you. Again, there's lots of resources out there about negotiation. One of the things I don't want you to do is don't let people push you around. Don't let people bully you. Buy yourself some time to gather your thoughts. Don't react emotionally. React with intelligence and with logic. And sometimes we have to take a step back and gather ourselves so that we can do that. Sometimes we have to talk to other people to get the words that we want to use that are more influential to help get our word across. Okay. But we're not going to let people beat us up. We're not going to let people disrespect us, and we're not going to let people bully us. And sometimes in order to make that happen, you have to get some other people involved. Okay. I hope you guys are enjoying your week. I will see you next week. We might dive a little deeper into how to negotiate for new construction, where I'm going to give you some advice about specifically how to negotiate with builders, because a lot of people don't feel like they have any room for that. And so join me next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Okay. Have a great day.
Thanks, Laura.
You're welcome. Bye, mamas.